Hey guys, Phil here. Just want to do a little aside before the video starts. While editing, I noticed that my new favorite word is essentially, so you're going to hear that word come up many times in this video. Going forward, I'm going to try to vary the words I use and try to stay away specifically from that word because it comes up a lot in the following 20-minute clip, but just wanted to put that out there before I get some comments about that because I know that's going to come up, and hope you guys enjoy the video. So I will see you guys next time. Hey, what's going on everybody? Phil here. So it is December 29th, which means that, New Year's coming up, holidays have already passed, all that jazz. And since holidays have passed, I can, come back and make more videos. So all operations for the Discord and the Twitch and the YouTube are back up and running. Um, we have 2 coaching sessions already planned for the new year, as well as we're getting a stream schedule and like YouTube video schedule kind of set up. So all that stuff is going to be coming back. We've had about a 2 or 3 week hiatus due to finals and holiday trips, and I had to move and a bunch of other stuff. But we are back, and what I wanted to do is I haven't played a ton of Hearthstone in the past couple days, simply because holidays. We took a trip to Chicago. I had the move, lots of stuff going on, but over the holiday break, I was able to hit Legend for this month. And while I'm kind of in the dumpster at the moment, I wanted to kind of reflect on the decks which I used to hit Legend this month, because unless another balance change ends up, coming to the game, the meta going into January is essentially going to be the same as the meta was post December 19th patch. So the December 19th patch essentially removed Odd Paladin as we knew it from the game. It nerfed Druid from a 56% win rate class to like a 43% win rate class, and Kingsbane as a control deck was severely hampered, and I haven't really seen it come back, but again, I haven't had too much experience in the post-nerf metagame. But turns out that the strongest deck before the Druid nerfs is still one of the strongest decks in the game, if not the strongest post-Druid nerf. So, Spell Hunter is the main deck which I used to hit Legend with this month. It's fairly a straightforward deck. You have some early game control, you run secret plans and a bunch of secrets to buff up your spellstones. Spellstone on 5, if it's a fully upgraded spellstone, is basically the best card you can play in the entire game on 5. There's very few things that deal with it, and so a lot of classes that either aren't Hunter or are going for a controlling game plan need to have a way to answer a spellstone. And not only do they need to answer a spellstone, they need to be able to answer multiple spellstones throughout the game, because you get 2 from the 2 spellstones in your deck, you get a third or fourth from Zul'jin, and in the same vein, you need stuff that answers to my side, which kind of coincides with dealing with spellstones, because they're very similar threats. Um, so decks like Control Priest are common in the metagame right now because you have Duskbreaker available. Duskbreaker will kill a non-curve spellstone, which is great. Elemental Mage has been seeing some experimentation because of Arcanosaur, which, depending on if you go first or second, can come out a turn late, which can feel kind of bad. But we also have access to Elemental Evocation, which allows it to come out at the same speed as Duskbreaker. So that deck and that archetype seeing experimentation and refinement is kind of cool, but all of it is centered around the fact that you have to be able to answer a spellstone on 5, because if you take 12 upwards of 24 damage over 2 turns on turn 5, there's not a whole lot you can do that game. Um, so yeah, spellstone is a very large component of your win condition. Baited Arrow is great against aggro. Flanking Strike is just a good overall control tool. Lots of how you beat more aggressive decks is you just have a ton of removal that also gives you threats. So you kind of 2 for 1 with every removal piece. That's Flanking Strike, Baited Arrow, and sometimes you can get a Wandering Monster to work as removal, and that's kind of cool. And sometimes that minion lives, and so that can 2 for 1. And then the powerhouse of the deck is really Zul'jin. Zul'jin's a new card with the expansion, and it is easily the highest win rate card when played, um, possibly ever. It's actually its stats are incredibly powerful. Like I think I don't I don't have it pulled up, but I swore 2 weeks ago that Zul'jin had a 78% played win rate, which is really bonkers. Essentially, Zul'jin in the Spell Hunter package. Obviously, Zul'jin is run in certain other variants of Hunter as well, but in this pure spell list, it will give you one, two, three secrets, and then any secrets that you get with Secret Plan, as well as discovering you extra resources through your secret plans. Um, in the Hunter Mirror, I ran a Flare because my local meta for ranks 2 and 1 was a ton of Hunters. So Flare is good just on its own if you're going against Hunters because everyone is playing secrets. And then with your Zul'jin, it pops all the secrets again, which in the mirror means if they Zul'jin first, you can Zul'jin and flare all their secrets away, which is incredibly powerful. But your Zul'jin in this list that I'm running will essentially clear the enemy board because it has a Crushing Walls in there, so that's 2 minions dead. It has Baited Arrows and Flanking Strikes, which will occasionally hit, enemy minions. It has a Deadly Shot, which is guaranteed to kill a random enemy minion. And you have a chance with Animal Companions and To My Sides to get Huffers, and then you also have a chance to get Unleash the Hounds, which if you pair that with like a Leok from a To My Side or from an Animal Companion, that becomes a very very good controlling tool or a very good like pressure tool because a bunch of 2-1 chargers is pretty strong in the late game just because you get all that extra chip damage in. Um, so Zul'jin essentially wins you the late game if you get there, and Deathstalker Rexar in heavy control matchups, so stuff like Odd Warrior, Jaina Mage, Control Priest, kinda. You can sometimes just get there with spells against Control Priest, and then Deathstalker is kind of just an extra tool. But Build a Beast essentially means that you can go infinite versus any deck, um, and that means that control decks will eventually run out of threats. So Spell Hunter is extremely well rounded right now. It has some of the best anti-aggro tools with Deathstalker Rexar's AoE, Baited Arrow, Flanking Strike, Hounds is okay. You get to use Wandering Monster, which is an incredibly powerful card. Turns out that a 3 mana minion for 2 is really good, kind of like how in the past Avenge was a 1 mana 3/2, which is the stats of a 2 cost minion, but it only costs 1, so that saw play in almost every Paladin deck. So Wandering Monster will continue to see play in almost every Hunter deck until it gets rotated out. And your early game package is really good against aggro. There are a lot of 3 health minions going around, so Explosive isn't super good, but even Shaman's really popular, so Explosive just completely destroys even Shaman. And the chip damage can help, especially if you have stuff with candle shots, just getting that AoE, being able to clear with Hounds or candle shot, set up for Baited Arrows to get 5/5s is really strong. So there's not too many like super nuanced plays in Spell Hunter. It's a lot of maintaining your resources, figuring out what you can afford to extend, um, keeping track of what spells you played for your Zul'jin so that you can more reliably know what your Zul'jin's going to do. Uh, Basically, if you're in any sort of losing position, you need to have had to have played a Crushing Wall and a Deadly Shot to be able to Zul'jin effectively, because you have to, you really want to clear their board with your 10 mana play. Otherwise, it's 10 mana mega full board, and that's good. But if you don't roll any taunts, that doesn't impact their board that heavily. So this deck is incredibly strong. It was really good in the Hunter Mirror. I think if you're looking to cut stuff, the list I was running, which is this one, doesn't run trackings. I don't like tracking as a card personally. I had a lot of mirror matches and control matches, so using tracking would remove 2 cards from my deck, and then remove another 2 cards from my deck, so I'm down 4. And then when you Zul'jin, you lose another 4, and putting yourself 8 more into fatigue that way against controlling matchups can be really detrimental. So I cut both trackings. I also didn't run any Hunter's Mark simply because I wasn't facing many decks which had like big minions as their win condition. But with Candle Shot, with Explosive Trap, with Secret Plans to get more explosives and stuff like that, Hunter's Mark is definitely a consideration. It's really, really good. And aside from that, like you cut one hound, put in a flanking strike, but this is pretty much a standard list. It just doesn't run the hunter's marks and the trackings. I instead replace those with secret plans, flare, and double hound. So spell hunter really strong. I plan on doing a big stream of spell hunter just as the last day of the ladder, see how high I can get kind of thing. So be on the lookout for that, and that will give you some insight on how to pilot the deck, kind of how some of the decisions work. But for this video, I'm just going to leave it at the list. Deck code will be in the description if you want to use this specific spell hunter list. Along with Spell Hunter, I also tested a couple other decks while I was climbing. Unfortunately, I don't have the stats saved because it was mostly through a tablet during the holiday. But I was testing out this Burn Shaman. This is a Burn Shaman, or at least I got the idea for this Burn Shaman from a list that Dog was running. He ran it at some tournament, like at the very beginning of the expansion. If I am able to find what tournament that is, I'll have a little pop up in the video, so maybe that pops up right now. And essentially, it's a very aggressive Shaman deck with tons of burst, and you get lots of sticky minions through the use of Unbound Elemental and Thunderhead. Thunderhead's a card that in my Even Shaman videos I critiqued as being fairly weak, but people were trying to find a home for. I definitely think that something like this deck is much more suited to its playstyle because you're able to run both Zap, Lightning Bolt, and Voltaic Bursts. These 1 mana overload spells are incredibly powerful tempo swings with Thunderhead or with Unbound Elemental. Especially if you're able to, get a Flame Tongue out, your Voltaic Bursts will both be 3 damage rushers instead of 1. Lickum is a very strong early game weapon. It allows you to get a lot of that extra chip damage in that you need. That's something that Burn Shaman in the past was missing ever since Spirit Claws got nerfed. I think that Lickum is just a purely better Spirit Claws, purely simply because you use so much overload synergy in this deck. And since you're able to run Lickum because you run all the overload synergy, you're also allowed to run Unbound Elemental, which is surprisingly strong. In the meta, there's not a lot of things that deal with a 4 health minion on 3. There's stuff like Flanking Strike, which deals 3, Kill Command without a beast deals 3. There used to be Druid Spellstone, but Druid has fallen off a lot since its nerfs. So with Druid getting nerfed, its removal you don't have to worry about as much, and its insane armor gain you don't have to worry about as much. So Burn Shaman found a better place in the metagame. Um, it's a very powerful deck. It's really good versus Hunter because Hunter doesn't have a lot of life gain. If you get into the kind of late mid game or super late game versus Hunter, they can Rexar up, get some lifesteal zombies, and at that point you're in a really tricky spot. But no game is ever truly lost with this deck. You really have to play out every turn, even if everything looks bad. Um, Simply because you have an incredible amount of damage that you can put out. Electra Storm Surge is like the MVP card of this deck because you're able to double up any spell. If you're able to get a Doom Hammer and then double up a Rock Biter, that is 16 damage in 1 turn through just your weapon attacks. It only costs 5 mana, so in the late game or in the mid game, you're at like 7 total mana. You play that for 5, and then you're also able to fit in like another Rock Biter or some Lightning Bolts and stuff. Essentially, you have 2 different game plans with this deck. You try to go for early board control with Fireflies, Knife Juggler, Flame Tongue, and then you can start getting some combos with Unbound Elemental, Thunderhead to maintain the board. So it's very good versus aggressive decks. And in if that plan fails, then you're able to transition into a all face deck where you just prioritize hitting face with pretty much every spell. If you roll spell damage, even better. You have incredible burst with double lava burst, Electra, Doomhammer combos with Rockbiter, and you really can just get there. Essentially, in this current meta, there's Hunter, there's Odd Warrior, there's some Control Priest going around, and then there's like Healadin. So it's not in a great spot in the current metagame because Heal Paladin is really difficult to beat. You can sometimes get there. They have to draw pretty well to out sustain your damage, but they have a very high likelihood of be able to sustain your damage. Control Priest would seem like a bad matchup because it's Priest, so they can heal every turn, but they're quite slow, so you're actually able to typically get underneath them. So it's good versus priest. It's very good versus hunter because they don't have many life gain tools, and then odd warrior is like a 10% matchup. There's almost no way you can beat odd warrior with this list. They essentially you have to dodge both brawls, you have to dodge both shield slams, and really your only chance is trying to make a giant unbound elemental, or going for like a Doomhammer, Electro, Rock Biter turn, something big like that. But that matchup's essentially as bad as like the old Freeze Mage versus Control Warrior matchup was. So this list is definitely interesting. I do think that when the meta shifts again, and aggressive decks come back into the meta, because currently there's not that many aggressive lists, this list will get a lot better because its anti-aggro tools are pretty strong. It can contest the board very easily through lots of synergistic cards like Unbound Elemental, Thunderhead, Voltaic Burst, Knife Juggler, Flame Tongue, and once more of the armor gain classes and like kind of fatiguey game plans go away, this will become a lot more powerful. But something to look out for. And then the last list I wanted to bring up was this mid-range hunter. So after I hit legend, I got bored of spell hunter, and hunter is still one of the strongest classes in the game. So I was looking at other archetypes. There's death rattle hunter, which is kind of fallen off a bit. It's not seemingly as strong as the other archetypes, but it's still around. So I didn't want to play that. Played death rattle hunter all last expansion. Spell hunter I just played. There's mid-range hunter, which we're about to talk about, and then there's like the big recruit hunter that uses secrets and spellstone synergy and stitch tracker with Katharina and stuff like that. And that list is cool, but it didn't interest me as much. It's basically the same kind of idea as Death Rattle Hunter and Spell Hunter kind of combined, which I've played both those decks like a lot. But this is a list which has come out of nowhere. I'm not sure who should be credited with like the original idea of this list. The first time I saw it was through Brian Kibler, so shout out to his videos, his Twitter, and it uses the new card Master's Call. So Master's Call is discover a minion in your deck. If all three are beasts, draw them all. So essentially, in this list, it is 3 mana, draw 3 minions. Because of this restriction that you need to have only beasts, cards that used to not see play because they were a little bit too fringe and like they were only good at certain times if you drew them correctly, like Timberwolf, Scavenging Hyena. Both of those, their value gets super skyrocketed by the fact that you have such a higher chance of drawing them. So you basically just overwhelm the early game with one drops. So Dire Maul, Spring Paw, and Crackling Razormaw are your early game package. You try to control the board, get some chip damage in like that, and later in the game you can use Master's Call to draw 3 minions so that you don't run out of gas. You can Dire Frenzy before you Master's Call so that you get buffed up minions. So if you're able to land a Dire Frenzy on a Spring Paw, that's 3 1-mana 4/4 rushes that go in your deck, which you can then draw with Master's Call. That's incredibly powerful tempo swings. I do think that in this list, if you're looking for some changes, trying to fit in a second Dire Frenzy would be pretty strong. Removing Halazi is, you can consider that. I personally think that Halazi is really good. I'm not actually sure how to pronounce this, by the way, so I'm going to say Halazi. It feels a little bit off, though, but that's cool. But the Lynx is very powerful. It gives you lots of disposable 1/1 minions, which you can combo with Tundra Rhino. So in the late game, you go like Tundra Rhino, Lynx, 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 Timberwolf, and that's an incredible amount of burst damage. And that combined with the fact that you dominate the early game because no deck can really keep up with your threats. Spell Hunter, you have to play around traps. That can be kind of tricky. But essentially, most lists in the metagame right now don't have a lot of early game control. They mostly have like mid game swings to deal with spellstones because there's really no aggressive decks out there. Even Shaman and this deck and like kind of Odd Rogue, but Odd Rogue has also fallen off. So aggro is kind of dead, which is interesting for the metagame. That's not something that comes up very often in Hearthstone metagames. But that makes it this list, which can just get there with lots of small guys, buff them all up, adapt them with Crackling Razor Maw, get a Scavenging Hyena up there, kill Command Burst, Timberwolves for extra damage, and you know, at the end of the day, you have Rexar, so you have game versus any deck because Build a Beast is just so powerful. Build a Beast with Dire Frenzy is really, really strong as well, because if you build a really good beast, you Dire Frenzy it, then you Master's Call, you can potentially get copies of that zombies back. Um, this deck just has a lot of staying power. It doesn't seem like it seems very unassuming. This deck, just looking at this list, it doesn't seem that powerful. But I also intend on making a video highlighting this deck through some gameplay because this list has a lot of nuance to it. It has a lot of things going on, and there's a lot of games that end up like you just played the early game out correctly, you got some good draws, you hit them for, I don't know, 10, 15 damage, and in the late game, there's just so much potential burst that you don't even really notice until like you count out all your damage and you get there. It it's able to generate giant swings of burst damage due to the two Timberwolves, and Animal Companions can get Leox, which buffs up your burst even more. So while it seems very potentially weak, it seems like it can kind of get steamrolled over with some control tools. In the current metagame, it actually is able to go under a lot of decks, and then even going into the mid game, late game, you have Rexar, so you have game versus anything. But that's basically what I wanted to talk about. These were the three decks which I used to hit Legend, and then I played a little bit at Legend with this mid-range Hunter list. And I just wanted to use this video as a here's some deck lists to consider moving forward. If you're going for that very last minute push, like I said, it's the 29th, so you have 2 more days to get to that Legend or get to that every 5 rank cutoff point. These lists will all probably be able to get you there. They're very strong. And be on the lookout for new videos over on the YouTube, new streams over at twitch.tv/Nork Coaching. And then if you want to join the Discord is in the description box below. We do coaching sessions there. We have a nice little community. So if you want to join that, hit us up there. And yeah, glad to be back to making videos, and I will see you guys next time.